We'd like to thank you in advance for attending our Retail Leadership Series featuring Justine Mannering, Managing Director at Stifel. As we all know, the global crisis has had a devastating impact on industries and businesses worldwide. No two industries or regions are alike, and they are all experiencing the impact of this crisis in different ways. As a result, businesses will need to tailor their financing and restructuring strategies to fit their unique industry and regional challenges. As part of our latest Datasite Thought Leadership Series, Navigating the Storm, we are conducting a series of short interviews with industry experts to help deal makers think through the storms ahead and get some practical advice on how to start preparing their businesses and clients for the restructuring wave that's about to hit. With that said, I'd like to introduce you, Justine, to talk about the consumer retail sector. Justine, obviously retail is in the eye of the storm when it comes to the current global crisis. We see every day more businesses closing doors or laying off workers. It's tough to see how many companies, such as those that rely on brick and mortar operations, can survive in this environment. From your perspective, how has the retail sector responded to the recent market events and volatility?
Yeah, Brandon, so as you said, it's a different story for every retailer, for every region, and for every subsector, but there really have been kind of a tale of two ends or two stories here. We've seen, just devastation in the discretionary retail sector. So anybody selling into apparel, home furnishing, personal care, where those sites are closed and very dependent on their bricks and mortar. As you refer to, the furloughs and the layoffs have been just unprecedented in number, and with retailers now effectively only being able to sell online, and even that coming under pressure, we've seen just huge revenue losses and real distress across that part of the retail sector. And then on the other side, when we're looking at more staple consumer retailers, if you're looking at grocery, you're looking at food, drugstores and pharmacies, and even just basic home stores like a Lowe's or a Home Depot, we're seeing the opposite, where while they cannot get consumers into the stores, just being able to keep up with the demand for product, being able to keep anything on the shelves, is a different set of challenges that they're trying to face as well. So I think, particularly we're spending a lot of our time working with clients on the more discretionary side, where everybody's trying to work through solutions to get through the next 3, 6, 9 months, and with a lot of uncertainty around being able to forecast what's going to happen. So we're starting to help them think through strategies for trying to mitigate some of what they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis or a week-to-week basis.
And so what subsectors do you expect to be the most resilient and why?
Yeah. So, as I alluded to, there's kind of pockets of good news is hard, but pockets of the sector which is holding up. So we're seeing grocery holding up, and particularly, local and regional grocery has certainly seen an increase in demand, which is, helping to support those industries. And I think we'll continue to see, food and grocery benefiting from this for a period to come, as people, really focus on what they need rather than what they want. Obviously, we've seen a spike in home electronics, although I'm not sure that that's sustainable, and it's really been around setting up for work from home. And then any retailers that are really focused on a work at home product or service have again, really benefited from this. And I think, our general view is that this will accelerate the move to online across the industry. So, for bricks and mortar retailers who maybe they had 20 or 30% of their revenue online, obviously now it's 100% for many. And increasingly, I think as we come out of this and the stores do reopen, I think we'll find that consumer behavior has changed and that there is more focus on that online channel. And so we're seeing particularly retail platforms that are marketplaces, which allow businesses to reach consumers, some of the digitally native brands who are already well set up to service clients. Those sectors have held up better, although it's very hard to say that anyone hasn't been impacted. And then maybe the final two, which we've seen really hold up, wellness, anything to do with self-care, at home self-care with a reasonable price point has seen, you know, good or reasonably resilient and good performance. And then speaking for itself, CBD and cannabis seems to be holding up fairly well as well, as I think people are again looking to manage anxiety and certainly, you know, more people staying at home.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And you alluded to it a bit before, but which of the subsectors are hit the hardest and why?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we've all seen the press and, you know, just extreme kind of impact on employees and the retailers in the really discretionary area. So particularly apparel, we've seen just, you know, with the stores closed, you know, a lot of consumers are, you know, choosing not to spend right now. And if they do spend, of course, they can spend online, but there are a lot of companies who are not seeing that coming through. And then big ticket items like furniture, you know, we're expecting that to be fairly hard hit. You know, there's a lot of complexities around buying those big ticket items, you know, anything from the long lead time to delivery, logistics, you know, how do you get it into your house? And so those are the two that we've really seen hit the hardest. And then on the other end, maybe less retail, but just restaurants and four-wall fitness concepts and, you know, leisure, anything where it really is a in-store service or product is just, you know, very hard to manage through this, especially, you know, with a struggle to see when it might end.
Yeah, and so with those struggles you just mentioned, have you yet seen divestitures or restructuring activity pick up? And if not yet or not now, I guess when?
Yeah. So as part of Stiefel, we have a very big restructuring practice, which we brand under Miller Buckfire, and I think we can safely say that we haven't been this busy in 10 years. We've seen a huge wave of particularly retail companies coming to us, and maybe a little early, but you know they know that there are going to be issues coming down the line for them, especially if they are levered. You know, some of these retailers were struggling already. So, you know, if you were struggling going into this with a heavy debt burden or, you know, concerns around your profitability or your performance, this has really exacerbated it. And so I think the first wave that we've seen was really that kind of cohort of retailers. And what we're starting to see this week, and we're expecting more into next week, is what we're sort of seeing as a second wave, which will be where companies which were reasonably healthy are really starting to understand what the impact is for them. And while they may come out, they are certainly going to need to rethink the strategy around, you know, capital structure and performance and covenants as they're going through. So yes, we've seen a lot of people starting to talk about restructurings. We haven't yet seen as many filings as you might have expected. I think you'll see a number in the next week or so. And coming out of that, I think you'll see a lot of restructuring work out of court. So one of the things that's fundamentally changed at the moment is, particularly in retail, you know, the playbook for you file a Chapter 11, you cut your store base, you liquidate some inventory, and you come out healthier is harder to run through. And so, you know, we're expecting a slightly different restructuring environment and slightly different deals to get done. We're seeing a lot more extend and amends on debt facilities. We're seeing a lot more lenders starting to talk about debt exchanges out of court, and really, you know, everybody trying to work out the best way to not only support the retailers but also just to preserve value, you know, through this period as we move forward.
Gotcha. And with that said, what sort of strategic questions should participants who may find themselves needing to restructure or reorganize be asking themselves at this point?
Yeah, so, you know, I think the key here is cash management, you know, being really realistic about how much cash do they need and what can they, you know, afford to support from a cost base over the next 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. You know, a few weeks ago, we were telling people to model to, you know, maybe a June opening. Now we're saying, you know, run some scenarios. You know, maybe it opens in May, maybe it's June, maybe it's September. But make sure that you understand what your cash requirement is really early on. And it's just all about preserving cash. You know, I think everybody's done the obvious, which is to draw down on facilities where it makes sense. And there are times when it doesn't. but just making sure that you're well positioned for that period. And then, again, asking questions of whether or not you can benefit from some of these provisions that the government is making. So, there are a lot of technicalities around the new CARES Act, but making sure that you fully understand the implications for your business and all the other, options that are out there for you to support both you and your employees.
Gotcha. And maybe this is a bit of a more general question, but what are some of the pros and cons of restructuring?
Yeah. I think it's interesting, particularly for retail. There's a history of, good and bad retail restructurings. And so I think, there are some pros. You can restructure your business in a way that actually positions you to be stronger coming out of this situation. I think, if you are sitting on a long tail of retail, which is unprofitable, or you've got a bloated cost structure or a debt burden that is just unmanageable, even in normal circumstances, this is really the opportunity to look through it, to negotiate with your stakeholders, and to make sure that you're well positioned, when we do get, back to some form of normalcy here. And I think the pros of addressing it really early is that you can control the process, because what you don't want is to be hit, blindsided, or to just do nothing, and then get to a position where you can't control any outcomes. And so we are recommending to people that they, engage advisors early. It's a little self-serving, but I do think, making sure you have the right legal advice, making sure you have the right financial advisor, get it early, make sure you're ready for when you really need to do something. Because I think there are some cons of restructuring, right? Like going into a bankruptcy process unprepared can result in real damage to your brand and your equity. And just, being able to losing control of a situation so that it ends up, being, damaging to everyone is also the case if you're not prepared. So I think, restructuring done in a controlled and prepared way is great. And just making sure you're really well positioned to do that is important.
Interesting. And just finally, any last words or practical advice for those that will be undergoing or will be going through restructuring?
Yeah, I mean, I think all we can say is, what we've seen in the market is that, lenders and stakeholders are being as supportive as they can, but it's really, really important to just get ahead of any issues. So making sure that you're well advised, you've thought through your scenarios, where you are is really important, because there's going to be a lot of retailers, there's going to be a lot of consumer brands who are going to face, really difficult times in the next few months here. And, the sooner you can get to a position that is, somewhat sustainable for your business, the better. So, important to start thinking about it early.
Excellent. Well, great. Thank you, Justine. And thanks in advance for your participation today. It's definitely great to hear from leaders like yourself in the space, especially as we continue through these uncertain times. So that is all for today. And thanks everyone for listening in.
Great. Thank you, man.